What's up, y'all? This is the FemFuture Podcast, where we, you, me, and the audience around us gets the opportunity to learn from amazing women that are curating a better future for themselves and others. I'm your host, Amber Latrice, and today I am joined by a teacher, writer, podcaster, doctor of philosophy, all around amazing woman, Miss Gwendolyn. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that intro. I'm very humbled by it. Thank you.
Awesome. Of course, we got to give you the best intro. It's my job to pump everybody up. I love it. So we've had the opportunity to have some conversations before the podcast, and I've gotten the opportunity to be exposed to the amazing woman that you are in the short amount of time that we've talked. But for my audience that hasn't gotten the time to get to know you or gotten the chance to get to know you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm in California. I studied philosophy from when I was a freshman in university, and I just fell in love with it. And I've been doing that for years. And I teach existentialism, which talks about questions of the meaning of life. I have a class on philosophy of sex and love. So we talk about sexuality and debates about it, gender roles. And I also teach an intro to philosophy class, which is still one of my favorites because I get to talk about what I love and introduce it to a whole new group of people. And yeah, I have an educational podcast where my partner and I, Rudy Salo, we try to be philosophical, and we invite experts on to learn about the underscoring ideas that drive their work. And I use that as part of my syllabus. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We've had people from like the medical community to politics to entertainment to art, and just to all say like, okay, what motivates you? What is the idea? What is the lesson here? And how that teaches us to live life well. So I've noticed, I'll wrap it up because you just asked for a brief intro, but I've noticed that even in all of my subject areas and everything that I study, and I've noticed that I've always kind of come back to this question: what does it mean to live life well? Because in education, we teach all the major subjects, which are important, don't get me wrong. But if we're not figuring out why we are here and what is the point of living and why should I live? And then can you do that well? Like, is there some sort of a measurement so that we have some sort of a guide? And because that's what makes everything else worth it. That's what will motivate the scientists, the artists, the podcasters, is that we have to understand and appreciate what it means to enjoy our life. We don't teach people how to enjoy their lives, right? We'll teach them computer science, some math, some history, some literature, but it's like, what does it mean to enjoy your life? So that comes across in my classroom, that comes across in my writing. I've noticed that's my own theme. And then that also comes through, hopefully, in the podcast.
Awesome. So thank you for telling us a lot more about who you are right now. We like to get to know a lot more about who you were and set that foundation. So I have a question about your younger self. Who was Gwendolyn at age 18?
It gives me pause to answer that question, but I'm realizing how important it is, because I know that right now, even with my students or people who don't know me, they'll see that I'm doing quite well. I'm doing quite well for myself. I'm very happy and very content. That it is even difficult for me to remember the 18-year-old self. And the reason is because I was in a lot of pain and I was very angry at the age of 18. So when I was younger, just a few years before, but my father had passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
And thank you. I was very angry at the world. I was very, very angry. Like he was only 49 years old. Now that I'm getting older, it's really hitting me how young that is, because I'm 45 and it really is hitting me.
Okay.
But when I was Thank you. Thank you. I have a great dermatologist. I have to credit her. I'm going to her every 3 minutes. I'm like, do your thing. Just do your thing. All right. But at any rate, when I think back at that time, I was at a small private school, and you just have this desire to fit in, and I didn't want to be known in this way as the person who had lost her father. I had a lot of pride. I also had a lot of pride about the radical different financial situation that my mother and I were in as a result of him passing away. And so I had this anger at the world of this kind of why me. And so by the time I graduated high school, I had a major chip on my shoulder. And what a lot of people would be surprised to know about is that when I started university, my first semester, I bombed. I didn't do the work. I didn't show up to classes. I know right now I'm this academic who does everything, and I try to encourage people to read and to study. And I just bombed. And it wasn't until my second semester, so around 18, where I took my first philosophy class, and I was so in love with the study that I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I was inspired again. Now, as far as why that's important is because to this day, even in the classroom, when I can see that my students are struggling, I think that I am better at reaching out to them to figure out what's going on, because I am aware of that own experience, that if somebody is not doing well academically, that's not a reflection of their intelligence. It can be a reflection of something else going on. And so it's made me better, and it's made me more excited about my life, maybe from having gone through that dark period. And I remember I had even gained a lot of weight, like everything was a mess, my 18-year-old self. But getting out of that dark place to really, I did have good friends. And I had good teachers in high school who could see the good in me, and they encouraged me. And I recently had the chance to actually thank one of those teachers. I mean, like 20 years later, I had a chance to. I was actually invited to my high school to give a talk to the scholarship dinner. And one of the teachers who had a really big impact on me was in the audience, and I started to tear up. It's gonna make me tear up now, that I was able to thank her for encouraging me, and that I, to this day, think about her when I am teaching. So I remember, one of the things that she said was, my job is to make sure when you leave this room, you know more than when you walked in. And I've really thanked her for that, so that I have kept that in mind when I'm thinking about what is partly my purpose and my goal in the classroom.
Oof, I love that. I love that. Okay, so 18-year-old, the things that you experienced in those teen years has had significant impact on who you are and what you do, the way you do it today. But can you take us back a little bit and bridge that gap for us? Can you take us on the journey from that 18-year-old self that was angry, that was experiencing the hurt, that wasn't quite sure about everything, to becoming the woman that you are today?
Yes, I don't think everybody has this. I think everybody, when they experience a loss, they'll have different reactions. I'm very, very fortunate that I had a good relationship with my father. Like, I genuinely missed him. I actually resemble his side of the family, and in personality am more similar than I am to my mom, who's a lovely woman. But she and I just didn't take after her. And there was a part of me that, after I got out of that sadness, and it was actually a class that I took that really struck me. It was a class on world religions, and it was reading Buddhist text that made me have a different idea. And one of the things in Buddhism is that you are the collection of everything around you. Like, what makes you you is not actually you. Like, oxygen, water, food, it's all outside of yourself. Defining myself as a guest on your show, that's only possible with you. And having this appreciation for the connectedness. And like I said, I resemble my dad's side of the family. And I can remember looking in the mirror and seeing his face, seeing his mother's face and my reflection, and
Wow.
feeling this sense of calmness of that I have borrowed features in a way, like I'm walking through the world in a different way,
Wow.
but I have their cheekbones, I have their eyes, I have their mouth, I have their hair. And it gave me a different sense of I didn't feel the loss. And so I didn't feel the loss. I felt kind of this, pride isn't exactly the word, but feeling like I wanted to live up and honor the family that I came from. And that
Yeah.
is what really drove me to experience. And also the fact that he passed away so young, I think that it made me want to think, if this is it with the life, I'm not going to pass anything up. And I
Mm.
delved into traveling. And traveling is one of my favorite things. I ended up going to graduate studies in Belgium, and I lived in Belgium for nearly 5 years. And being in Western Europe, it was very easy to travel all around. And I made wonderful friends who were also expats, and there were some Canadians and people from all over who went to Belgium to study philosophy. And so I had these wonderful connections. And like I said, it was super cheap. Like you could get on a plane and go down to Spain for like 50 euros. It was nothing. And then I stayed in some
Amazing.
dodgy places. Don't get me wrong, like hostels, like where you have to wear your flip-flops in a community shower.
Yes,
Like that's
definitely been
where
there.
then, yeah. But I think there was this sense of adventure that was the shift, was that when I started to not look at this as a loss, but start to appreciate what I had, and that I was part of something
Wow.
bigger, and that it made me just want to experience, taste different foods, talk to different people, learn languages, read everything that I could. And I still have that sense of, oh, I haven't been somewhere before, so why not just pick up and go? And I love saying yes to different opportunities. So that's how I started to shift and mold, and I think become a better person and a better thinker and a teacher and hopefully a good podcaster, all in that. And then writing about these ideas as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay, so you had the opportunity to adjust perspective in a major way while you were in grad school and while you were traveling. What made you decide to specialize or focus? Well, I guess before we go into your classes, what made you decide to actually go for the doctorate?
It's such a, when you're studying something like philosophy or something in the humanities, you have to deal with that question of, oh, what are you going to do with that? And there was all this pressure for me in undergrad, and my answer was always law school. And then when I finished undergrad, I got accepted to law school, and I had also applied to graduate school. And I realized, as I was holding these acceptance letters in my hand, that I had been saying law school to make everybody else comfortable.
Wow.
And I was not, it's not what I really wanted to do. My poor co-host Rudy is a lawyer, and he's like, it was a good decision. But he was like, he never encourages anybody to go into law. But you know what? I mean, I think as far as, the theme of your show and what you're doing here in these spaces for women, I think that women struggle with this. I think that there is a people pleaser that is imposed more on women to do that, to make other people comfortable. Like, I am trying to make other people comfortable with the fact that I am enjoying philosophy. So I would say that I was doing something that they could all understand, and then maybe leave me alone. And the truth of the matter is that I loved studying philosophy. I didn't know where it was going to take me, but there's some things that just light your soul up. Like, I would read texts of these amazing thinkers, and I would feel so alive and lucky that I would be able to have access to some of the most powerful thoughts in the world, and I could sit there and get lost in it. And I know that that's how some other people feel about different professions. Like, there's people who are really creative, there's engineers who are problem solvers, and they just enjoy that process of creation and building. And that's how I felt about philosophy. So I didn't know where it was going to take me. I just had to trust that it's what I was meant to do, that it's what I loved doing. So that's how, and I would encourage, like, especially for young women, it is hard. We have so many rules. We have so many, and the worst, I think this is one of the worst parts, is that it's not just societal rules, but that young women are also taught to keep each other in check. So for example, it's like, if, your makeup is slightly off and somebody be like, you need to fix that. Or there's ways. I lived in a sorority house when I was an undergrad, and people would want to share clothes. There is this undercurrent idea of what size you should be in order to be able to participate in that. So women will police each other. You almost don't even need the rules of society. And that is something that I think young women are getting stronger and better at this, because I think as a society, a lot of young women are growing out of the idea that they have to be presentable in order to be accepted and okay. I don't think it's totally gone away, but that notion of presentable, I think that people are getting a lot more comfortable in their own skin and their own messiness and their own talents and excitement, that the number one job for women isn't anymore just to find a man and get married. When that was the goal, then everything about the appearance was essential. Now young women have the goals of like, what are they going to create? Or am I going to be an entrepreneur? Or, there's so many other things in mind that the relationship stuff is actually shelved. And it's been a bit of a shakeup in American culture. There are some dudes who are not that happy. There was an article not too long ago that came out that was like, more and more men are worried about being single. And I think what happened was that men really needed to be providers. And then that was it. The personality was not required. But now that women can take care of themselves and need that intellectual and spiritual growth, they're no longer dependent on seeking it outside of themselves. They do it for themselves. So now the relationship status is not just, are you a provider, but what is your personality? And so there's been this huge shakeup. But back to my point is that I know that I spent a lot of time worried about what other people thought of me. And I don't want to see other young women go through that. I wish I had been a bit more, had a, to hell with that attitude, and just felt more comfortable in pursuing what I wanted. But I felt like I was kind of sheepish and constantly making other people more comfortable with my choices.
Wow.
Now it doesn't matter. Like when you're in your 40s, it doesn't matter. My friend Steven told me, he's like, when you're in your 20s, you worry about what everyone thinks of you. In your 30s, you don't care what anybody thinks about you. And then when you're in your 40s, you realize nobody's thinking about you. And there's this freedom where it's like, I think that that's true.
I love that. I love that. So I want to take a real quick step back to something that you mentioned at the beginning, which was the concept of being a people pleaser. Like the fact that you recognize that you chose law because of other people, and this desire to make them comfortable just blew my mind. But one of the questions I have for a listener or an audience member that might be tuning in, what advice would you have for her if she finds herself in this space where she's finally acknowledging, like, holy crap, I am a people pleaser?
Oh my goodness. I'm a big fan of journaling. I'm a big fan of going on walks, and maybe, while I love music and podcasts, I think that it's important to go for a walk and find out what that stream of consciousness is doing, and to allow the noise of your mind to just let it play and pay attention to it. And journaling as well, without trying to edit yourself, like maybe even set your timer for 15 minutes and just have your pen to paper, and don't even take up your pen, and just see, I call it brain vomit, like just let it all flow. We I think as far as figuring out if you're a people pleaser or what is the purpose or what is it you're trying to do. Now, again, I love social media. I love podcasts. I love music. I like being entertained, but we cannot lose sight of how important it is to listen to our own thoughts and take that time to not pay attention to what everyone else is doing or what everyone thinks of us. Like, I love social media. I'm totally addicted to TikTok, but I think because I'm 45, I can turn it off, but I can also acknowledge. But if you check social media first thing in the morning, you're doing one of two things, or no, maybe you're doing both. You're looking and seeing what other people are doing, or you're looking to see what other people think about you. And that is the first thought that starts a lot of people's days. It's not about themselves. It's not about what they want out of their day. Start the day. And I actually challenged my students. I said, can you do a week where just social media is not the first thing you do in the morning? I don't care if you're letting the dog out. I don't care if you're washing your face. Can you go a week to just make the bed? Just do one, just the first thing. It just can't be that. 2 of my students made it 3 days. And I said, what did you do? And they said, both of them said they washed their face and then they did it. But I think that we can't even get down to the heart of people pleasing or whatnot if we don't even take the time to listen to our own thoughts and maybe reflect on what do I want out of my day. And like, that should be the first thing that you think about. It's going to be a good day. What do I want to accomplish? And accomplishing doesn't necessarily have to be like some giant goal. It can be, I want to rest today. I want to do a Netflix binge today. I want to hear a story. I want to talk to a friend. Or it can be like, I need to get that homework assignment done. I need to edit that podcast. It has to be about what you want out of the day. That's how I think you figure it out. Don't be afraid of the silence or the noise, the stream of consciousness. It's okay. That's how we're wired.
Wow. I must admit, in your story, I was very shocked that only 3 of your students made it. Only a few of your students made it like 3 days. Like, wow. Because I do think that they're, and this could take us down a tangent, but I do think that there's like definitely an addictive nature to it. But I also think that what you said was so profound. Like, when you are not waking up and just allowing yourself to be, but the first thing you think about is what somebody else is doing in their life or what somebody else has to say about you, I can only imagine the impact that has over time. Now, you mentioned that you've gotten to a point where you could turn it off in terms of the social media. What advice would you have for an audience member that's like, wow, I really connect with what you're saying, but I'm not really sure how to not?
I know, that's so good. And I'm thinking like, I want to make sure that I navigate so that it's not just a matter of somebody who's older and like complaining about a younger generation, because that's not how I feel.
No.
That's why I'm always like very clear, like, hey, look, I like this stuff too. I've been on TikTok long enough where I've had the person pop up and say, hey, you've been on here for a while. And I'm like, mind your business.
Like, why are you judging me right now?
Yeah. So it's, I would, like I said, I can turn it off. I think, and this is also about some of the silence. One of the things that we need to do is pay attention to how we feel. So I know, for example, if I have 15 minutes between classes, if I were to scroll on my phone, I'm not then ready and energized to lecture in 15 minutes. If I walk around campus, then I'm ready to lecture. So you also have to be mindful of, because our body is letting us know how we're doing. It lets you know when something isn't right. It lets you know when you're energized. It lets you know when something is right. All of your senses are letting you know. Your body is designed to keep you alive and functioning. And so if it is tired and sluggish, and if your mind is wandering, then we have to figure out, okay, what is your body is letting you know that something is not right. I think maybe a practical thing could be, maybe, as far as first thing, like do a small habit of just not looking at social media first thing in the morning and just see how it goes. Maybe put a pen and paper next to your bed, or you said you're faith-based, maybe start the day with a prayer. That's what you're doing. Some gratitude for your existence, some connection with the divine, what it is that you seek help with or understanding. A prayer can be the beginning, or it could be a yoga pose. Like it could be, like I said, letting the dog out. So I would say start with a small habit, make a decision about a small habit, or maybe set your alarm at, like, let's say every day at 3 p.m. That's your time to think, to read, to walk, to get lost in your thoughts. Set the alarm so that you do it. Small steps.
Wow. Wow. And that's so practical. That is so practical. So you mentioned a little bit about your journey from where you were to where you are now. You talked about some of the people pleasing and making that key adjustment of not going to law school, but instead deciding to pursue your doctorate. What made you decide to focus on the courses that you've chosen to focus on?
For teaching or for studying? Well, I guess they're one and the same. They're one and the same. So my background is, I come from Catholic school. These are the private schools. Even in Belgium, the university was a giant Catholic university. It's from the 1400s. It's the oldest school in Western Europe. So I was pretty much steeped in this tradition. So this might seem odd, but I was fascinated with the atheistic existentialist thinkers because, and these are the thinkers who came out of France. These are thinkers like Sartre, de Beauvoir, and Camus. Their predecessors, Nietzsche and Kierkegaard. So these are existentialist thinkers. I loved reading them, but then I also became fascinated with these other thinkers that came out around the 1940s, Western Europe. And I think that what it did for me was I was fascinated with the connection that they made with trying to figure out the human experience and seeing where reason kind of stopped, that reason is extremely important, but that there is something about being human that evades reason. There are aspects of it. Faith would be an example. This is from Kierkegaard, but faith would be an example of something that is outside of reason. It is 100% personal between one person's relationship to the divine. And even when you try to talk about it in language, it loses its essence because it is something that is just part of the human experience. And if you have it or if you don't, and it's personal. So I always thought these aspects about existence were really interesting. And then with the atheistic thinkers, and I think because they were rejecting the very thing that I grew up with, I was actually more curious about, wait a minute, how do you find meaning in your life? And I thought it was just fascinating. It was this idea, the way that they navigated living a good life was to think about the present moment. And because they rejected the idea of an afterlife or of a God, somebody might think that's unethical, but for them, it meant that you were 100% responsible for yourself and for the world. The world is of your making, because in their position, there is no head honcho in charge, which means that if there are people starving in the world, there is something we need to do to step up to take care of it. And so, or if you are, I don't know what you are, let me try to think of another way to say it. Choices that you make in your life, they are constantly defining you. And a lot of times, according to these thinkers, we try to run away from it or come up with some sort of an excuse. But they're saying they were very serious about the idea that your choices actually reveal what it is that you were thinking. So let's say somebody's always late, right? Somebody's always late and they always have a reason. They don't want to be on the time. You gotta just you don't want to be where you said you would be on time. Like, let's just be honest here. Like, let's be real. There are not all of these excuses. So it can be like on, a small scale or a grander scale. But I also really appreciated, there's a feminist thinker by the name of Simone de Beauvoir. And there are not many women, there's no women in the history of philosophy. Any women
Wow.
who show up, yeah, it's the most male dominated academic discipline. And the women who show up now, they have a lot to say because they were on the outside of this history of thought, and they're able to contribute in a way and think about things that had not been thought because it had been dominated by Western European men. Western European men, I'm not down on the Western European men. There's great ideas that come out of that tradition, but it is fascinating for me to see, I'm reading more women who are critical of the history of philosophy and also offering something new. And it's for me, a lot of it comes from Simone de Beauvoir, who I fell in love with, but then there's a lot of women of color, a lot of women thinkers who are talking about this question of what is the relationship between the world in which I live in and the body in which I was born into, and where does freedom fit in there? And what are the choices? And I think that there's so much to explore there about the human existence. So that's what I really, really enjoy.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Can you give any recommendations to a listener that, like, maybe you said something that opened something in their mind, or maybe you said something that made them curious? Any suggestions of specifically the women that are now making strides? Any suggestions on who they should check out?
Yes, there's a book. The last name is Rodriguez, and the title, it's a collection of essays that's called For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts. And there's, it's the author, she's even been in, during the Obama administration, she was given an award for her work. I believe she's in her 30s. She's a great essayist, and she is essentially talking about what it is like to be in the world in American society. Her family's from Nicaragua, and so it's very cool. And in Southern California, a lot of my students are Hispanic or of Latino descent, Latinx. And so this kind of literature really resonates with them, and it's a joy to present it and to offer it, to have dialogues about it. And I'm constantly learning from my students as well when they are learning about this literature. I would say just one of my favorites is Bell Hooks in terms of contemporary thinkers. And her work is, you can see the evolution of her thought from like the 90s to around 2000 teens. And she's just really, she's so spot on, and her work is just so beautiful. I would also say, let's see, if anyone was interested in philosophy, one of my favorite kind of introductory texts, which is a very small book, but it's by the thinker Karl Jaspers, and Jaspers is spelled with a J, Jaspers. And he has a book called, I'm going to get the order wrong of the names, but I think it's called Socrates, Buddha, Jesus, Confucius. And it is only 90 pages, but a lot of people are familiar with these four men thinkers, leaders, and he writes about their philosophical outlook and what they have in common. And it's a really beautiful work for anybody who's interested in, like, I think I want to read a little bit of philosophy. What is all of this about?
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So I don't know if you're going to have a very philosophical answer to this, but one of the questions that I love to ask every guest is, if you had the opportunity to have a conversation with your 100-year-old self, what do you hope she'll tell you about the life you lived?
So if you had asked me this a few years ago, it would have been a different answer. I had a beautiful surprise. For my entire life, I was told that pregnancy was really not on the table, not possible. A viable pregnancy, definitely not. And to my surprise, 3 years ago, I had a daughter. She just turned 3.
Congratulations.
And she is, it's, like I can't even tell you. I mean, I was advanced maternal age. I was a high risk pregnancy. There were all sorts of feelings going through this pregnancy. And it's also when I had more than normal doctor appointments, and there was some scary moments, and there was this excitement mixed with this sense of guilt of like, I'm not supposed to be pregnant. What am I doing? I don't want her to be harmed or anything like that. She just turned 3. And so the reason why I say that question of my 100-year-old self would be different than before my daughter. I think before my daughter, a lot of the questions would be around like creativity, maybe my work in philosophy. But I look at my daughter and she makes me, her existence makes me want to be better and stronger. And I hope that for her, I want her life to be good. And I want to be part of a world that makes the world better. Like, this is also part of the goal of the podcast. What kind of content are we putting out there? I can't do every sociological battle, but I want for her to be in a world where maybe I put something out there to make it a little bit better. So I hope that I leave a mark that's a little bit better. And also, I would give anything if I could hear my dad's voice. So there's a part of me that likes recording so that if something, I'm going to find some wood to knock on. If something happened to me, I want for her to be able to say, that's my mom, with pride. So my 100-year-old self, I think, would probably ask about how I flourished and how she was kind of the catalyst for me caring more about making the world a better place for her. So that's what I think that's what it is.
Wow. That is so amazing. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing so much of your story. As we come to a close, do you have any final advice or one piece of advice that you'd hope myself and the listeners and viewers will walk away from that focuses on what we could do to more intentionally curate our future? Any final advice for us on how to intentionally curate a better future for ourselves and for others?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I just love your project here. I love that you asked me about my 18-year-old self. That wasn't the only time where I had, let's say, a dip and a disappointment. Maybe something didn't go my way. And there are moments when I have cried, and people who know me from the outside and they think like they'll have an idea about me, maybe a bit more strength, and might be surprised that like, hey, I've been in the fetal position crying because something didn't turn out and I was afraid of imminent disaster. When I look back on those moments, it really is about when things aren't going your way, it is an opportunity, and the sadness and your body responding is an opportunity for you to rebuild. And that is always stronger and it is always better. And I think that we are constantly like, we've swapped out the notion of character with image. So we are flooded with images of everybody who seems to be doing really, really well. And that we need to, it's okay to cry. It is okay to be disappointed. It is okay to fail. It is, I always tell my students, people who are successful have just failed more than you. Everything is about how you assess a situation. You're not alone when you are crying in the fetal position and you're upset, scared about money, career, friendships. You're not alone. That is a normal part of the human existence. We're just as unfamiliar with it because we're flooded with positive images of everybody doing well. Also reach out to your friends because they might be showing a positive image and they could be having a tough time. So what I want to say, final bit of advice, when those moments happen, it is okay. And it is okay if the sadness, like let's say a breakup or something like that, lasts for a little while. It is okay. You will get on the other side of it. Everything is about feeling and then reassessing. And I've always come back stronger from any of those moments. So that is my advice, is to like hang in there when the disappointment happens, because that means it wasn't a fit. And that's okay. You find your people, you find your group, you find your community, you find where things fit. And when they don't, it's okay.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank it. Thank it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. For any of the audience members that want to get in contact with you because they have questions or they want to continue the conversation, how can they reach you? Where can they find you?
Yes, thank you. My social media handles on Instagram and on TikTok are the same. It's Prof Dolski, ProfDolske. And then the podcast that I have with Rudy Sallow is called Good is in the Details. And we're in our 3rd season. And I think on Instagram is Good is in the Details pod. And we're on all the platforms, all the places. And that's really a joy. We have episodes bi-weekly. So I hope people listen to that and like it. And there's a whole bunch of different topics on the table there, all with the idea, what does it mean to live life well?
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with us. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. And to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, let's continue to engage, support, and encourage each other as we work together to curate a femme future.